Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Today we're doing a little bookwork. We're talking about Andre Norton's Quag Keep. Bum, bum, bum. A sort of a classic of fantasy in a way, but really more of a classic because of its link to what was this really new game when this was published back in 1978 called Dungeons and Dragons. In effect, this is the first Dungeons and Dragons novel. It makes some direct references to the original game. It's different enough, though, that you wouldn't call it a tie-in novel like the Dragonlance novels or Forgotten Realms. Was it the character Drizzt Do'Urden? I never knew how you pronounce that exactly. But, at one point TSR was publishing tons of novels based on their settings. This is not quite as tied into those, but it still is tied into Dungeons and Dragons. And it makes for an interesting read. Overall, happy with the book. Let's talk about it a little bit. I'm going to start reading the bit that's right here, sort of as a preface, not quite a preface exactly, but this isn't going to give anything away exactly because you're going to encounter it very early in the book, and in fact, you'll encounter it on page 1 if you open this thing up. And so it goes. We have discovered that it may be entirely possible that what a man dreams in one world may be created and given substance in another. And if more than one dream the same dreams, strive to bring them to life, then the more solid and permanent becomes that other world. Also, dreams seep from one space-time level of a world to another, taking root in new soil, and there growing, perhaps even to great permanence. You have all played what you call a war game, building a world you believe imaginary in which to stage your adventures and exploits. Well enough, you say. What harm lies in that? Only, what if the first dreamer who invented this world, according to your conception, gathered unknowingly dream knowledge of one that did and does exist in another time and space? Have you ever thought of that? Well, gives you a clue to the idea behind this book. And it's an idea that was pretty common in the fantasy fiction of that time. And therefore did have some bearing, a little bit, on the Dungeons and Dragons game. And this is the idea, to some degree, of a person of our modern world being drawn into a fantasy world. The Dungeons and Dragons cartoon uses this exact idea. 3 Hearts and 3 Lions by Paul Anderson. Same kind of concept. There were quite a few. And to some degree, that's what's happening with Quag Keep, although not exactly. It's a little different than that. And that was a nice twist at the end, because in all honesty, I'm not always a fan of that concept in fantasy literature. I think it can be a little bit lazy sometimes. It can be a little bit cutesy. 3 Hearts and 3 Lions, great book. Not a problem there. Fun in the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. But when I started reading this and came across that, it was that moment of like, oh man, am I going to dig this or not? And I wasn't sure. But the book really did ultimately catch on with me. So let's talk a little bit about the overall plot. You have these people, characters, who are brought together by a wizard. And they each have on their wrist this bracelet. They don't know where it came from. And the bracelet has these little miniature dice, the ones that you use to play Dungeons and Dragons. And He brings them together because of this, because it is some sign of some magic that's alien to him that he thinks is trying to force its way into their world. They cannot remove the bracelets. And so he puts a gauge on them that will force them to find out where this is coming from and end this threat. And none of them are real happy about this exactly, but they deal with it. Now, the main character, the one you're primarily reading the book through, is named Milo Jagon. And a swordsman. He's got a couple magic rings, and there is an element of magic to all the characters. That's the only one that he has, and they do become very important in the story in a couple different ways. And also, doesn't know where those came from. All of them have trouble remembering their past exactly. They know this world, but it sort of comes to them slowly. And the world is, well, sort of is the world of Greyhawk. Now, Gygax was already using that setting for his games. It was not perhaps developed quite to the level that we would get in the official Greyhawk products later. So some of the things don't really match what we will learn later on in Dungeons & Dragons circles about the world of Greyhawk. But the Greyhawk name is there, and there's a few elements that are there. A couple of them misspelled, funny enough. We also have in our company a swordswoman who has a little bit of magical ability called Yvel. There is an elf who, as near as I could figure, is called Ingergi. This is one issue I did have with this book. Some of the names are kind of hard to pronounce. And look, they're imaginary names. They're made up. You can do anything you want with them. Give your characters names that the readers can sort of pronounce and put in their heads. It was a tough one. There's a Wereboar, which was a really early class from like the Dragon magazine, of like a Berserker class where they were, werebeasts. And I wonder if that didn't inspire that somewhat. He's called Nail. He has a little Pseudodragon called Efrita that rides on his shoulder, who is important to the story. There is a cleric called Dine. There is a bard called Wymark. No magic user in the group, but I guess that kind of is important for the story as a whole. And a lizard man called Gulf, I believe. Gulf, that's right. Who is kind of a fish out of water, literally, on the adventure. They have to go to great pains to keep him alive with them. Becomes very, very important at the end. The characters are not like really deeply, richly realized, but they're realized enough for the story at hand. And so this team has to venture forth to find the source of this alien magic that is potentially going to, if not destroy their world, cause it some form of harm. And so the first thing they have to do is find the lair of this gold dragon, who's going to help them find their way, hopefully, to where they really need to get to their ultimate destination. A lot of traveling through the wilderness on this, a lot of the characters kind of getting to know each other and getting more comfortable with each other. None of them are chaotic. None of them are evil. But lizard men, well, the Wereboar doesn't trust him. And the Wereboar is not exactly lawful. He's a little bit rugged and he's a little bit trouble. And being a berserker in the midst of a fight, he could become dangerous to his comrades. But the Geisha means they all got to stick with it, whether they want to or not. It is sort of slow to begin. It takes a while to get the characters together, to have the wizard explain to them what's going on, and then to get them moving out into the wilderness. And I will admit, I was kind of at a certain point going, man, is this like really going anywhere or not? We do finally get a good fight scene in their early travels. And I want to read some of this so you can get an idea of how Andre Norton describes a fight. I found the fight scenes particularly good, especially a couple of the later ones. Really well written and really enjoyable. So let me read this to you. Just a couple 3 paragraphs. Milo leaped. He had sheathed his sword slowly so as to make no sound. What he was about to do might well mean his life. And I think when he said sheathed, they maybe meant unsheathed. But something within him urged his action, as if some fate worse than just death might follow if he did not try. He gained the side of the bony horse in that one leap. His mail-mittened hand arose, almost without his actually willing it, to catch at the nearer arm of the Druid. It was like clasping an iron bar as he swung his full weight to pull the arm toward him. By a surge of strength he did not know he could produce, Milo dragged apart those hidden hands, though the Druid did not lose his position on the horse. Ah! Now the head had swiveled about. The eyes tried to catch the swordsman. The other hand came into view, the sleeve falling back and away. It clawed with fingers that were nearer to long-nailed talons, swooped at Milo's face, his eyes. Between him and that awful gaze swept Afrita. The pseudo-dragon snapped at the descending hand with a faster movement than Milo could have made. A gash appeared in the flesh. Dark blood followed the line of it. So good action scenes. You don't get a ton of them, but they are very effective, and they do move the story forward. And by the time I got to the end of the book, the pace picked up. I was enjoying the characters more. And when you get right down to the last chapter, that's when it's all going to come together. And is it going to be one of these things where it's like, oh man, it was all just sort of this dream, this was all just a game that was being played? Well, no, it wasn't. It was a much better ending than that. And I was satisfied on the whole with the ending, and that it did leave it open to maybe do further adventures, which I don't believe were ever written, which is too bad. Quag Keep is an engaging, fun little read. It's not very long. I did a chapter a day. I usually have a book at work. I'll read a little bit here and there just to relax. And so I read it over the course of a couple weeks. Most people, like big-time readers, could probably down this entire thing in a day with no problem. But it's an engaging little read. It's pretty fun. The characters are decent. Good action. It's a good story overall. I enjoyed it. Like I said, a little bit slow to get started. It does pick up the pace, though. And like I said, I think it's a satisfying, ending. But I think that if you are a D&D player, modern or old school, this is a nice little piece of history to the hobby. It's worth reading. While it does not stick to the rules that a lot of us know in terms of Dungeons & Dragons, it's close. You could call it a homebrew setting to some degree. But it's right there at the beginning. And it shows that Dungeons & Dragons was having an impact. It was just beginning to have a cultural impact in the late 70s. That would become much, much bigger in the early 1980s, and frankly lasts to this day. And Quag Keep's a part of that. So, Andre Norton, Quag Keep, 1978. Fun, engaging little read. Worth giving it a look. Decent book. I don't think it's going to walk away falling head over heels in love with it, but I don't think you'll be sorry that you read it at all. So give it a look. Hey, is this a book you've read? I'd love to hear your comments, whether you liked it, whether you didn't like it, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. Put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about the book, I'll do my best to answer them for you. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, maybe share with a friend. That helps my little channel grow and stay alive, and helps me bring more little tidbits to you. Maybe little things that, especially if you're younger, maybe little things you haven't heard of before, something you might want to investigate. That's kind of what the aim of my channel is. Unearth little hidden gems. And this is one that I hadn't read before. And I was happy that I finally got a chance to look at it. So until the next video, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have some fun out there. Go find yourself a copy of Quag Keep and give it a read. I will see you next time in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.